I found it to be successful if you try to get the people involved and explain to them, let's move together and be excited about it.
Okay, so our third question is, what practical things did you need to consider? For example, the budget. You know, now that you have two parishes coming together, did Father Pastor or Administrator talk much about a budget with you, or did you have a budget? Instruments. I know a lot of concern with musicians that I've talked with are saying, they have some excellent questions as to, well, what if my church down the road, or my parish is going to close a church, and that organ is in much better condition than the one that I currently am playing. You know, what consideration will be given to moving instruments once they start closing churches? Also, of course, the pay scale, vacation days. If you are sharing responsibilities with another director of music, let's say there are 4 parishes and there are going to be 2 directors of music, and yet you're now one parish, how do you divide up weddings or funerals, or is it a coin toss, or those kind of things, and working with other staff musicians?
When they consolidated us and they said, okay, you're going to have to run back and forth between the worship sites, because of the 3 churches, St. Patrick's closed and they kept the other 2 open. And St. Denis was where I was from, which was a horrible, horrible church. The building was terrible. It was a basement under the school. It was supposed to be temporary. It was temporary for like 45 years. I think we got...
Everybody knows those buildings.
I think we got the very first electronic Allen organ out of the assembly. It was terrible. You would have been better off playing a microwave instead of the, And so when they said, we're going to be going to St. Perpetua's, I was happy. It was a beautiful church, there was a loft, there was a pipe organ, it was a no-brainer. I'm like, okay, let's just abandon the other place and move. So I was the first one running down there. The thing about budget, everything got better. Everything got better. All of a sudden we had more funding. The parish was stronger financially. And when they were liquidating some of the assets and some of the buildings that were no longer being used, all of a sudden we were flushed with money. There was now an endowment fund that we didn't have before. So budgets grew in leaps and bounds. My own salary at that time was more than doubled. The pastor said, oh, okay, we can pay everybody according to scale and blah, blah, so it was no issue. The one organist stayed on staff. She was retired, and she played the 8 o'clock Mass every Sunday morning at St. Denis. So when we ultimately moved to St. Perpetua, she retained that 8 o'clock Mass on Sunday morning. That was all she ever did. So I still took everything else on. One of the challenges, though, when we were consolidating the parishes was that every church had a different hymnal. And the repertoire was very different between the churches. I have to say, in all honesty, that was the biggest challenge. Everybody knew something different. One church had We Celebrate hymnals and missalettes in the pews. One church had Glory and Praise books in the pews. One church printed worship aids, even back then, which was sort of ahead of their time. So it was very different. That was the challenge, was getting 3 congregations to really, okay, we have to come together in our worship now. How is this going to work? So that was the most challenging part. Everything else, I have to say, was a huge improvement. Money, budgets, facilities, instruments, that was a perk, a major perk.
We too had different music, different hymnals in the pews in both churches, and we went with OCP. We made that decision because the people across the street at the other church were somewhat used to some Glory and Praise. A lot of that was in OCP. So we made the decision to go with OCP for both churches. We, I believe, had the music issue, and then we went to Breaking Bread, which is where we are now. with breaking bread in all 3 parishes, actually. So that was a huge thing. At one point, a new pastor came in and said, we're going with the Word and Song, I believe it was called. And so we were with Word and Song for about 2 years, and it eliminated, I think I counted 30 or 40 songs that we no longer could sing. The people were devastated. So I convinced the pastor to go back to an OCP product, even though it was more expensive. So that was very important. The other thing was merging the cantor programs. I'm glad that Mary Beth was talking about that because you reminded me of something we did. The one church didn't have, the cantors met on a Saturday to practice or Friday to practice. My way of doing things, we had too many people. We had like 21 cantors at the time. I couldn't do that. So I would run off, at the time we used cassettes. So I would run off a cassette for everyone every single week. So when we merged cantor programs, those people actually felt like, yay, we're going to get a practice cassette the week before. So that worked out there, is that cassette really helped. Also, I hired the same organ tuner for both churches, both St. Joseph and Immaculate Conception. Unfortunately, now there's not one working instrument in any of the 3 buildings. All 3 molars have fallen into serious disrepair, and there is no budget. So we're hoping, the molar that's at St. Joseph that Father John Mihawk had restored is a magnificent instrument. We're hoping that we're going to find a way to use that instrument in whichever church building remains open. So that, I think that is, yeah, that's about it as far as the practical aspects of things.
Hey, Jane.
Yes.
You had that instrument MIDI real nicely.
It was in, I believe it was 1979 or 77. I think Father John had one of the first instruments, if not the first instrument that had the MIDI installed in it, and he was way beyond his time too. He had some MIDI hooked up into the instrument, into the molar at St. Joseph. Very nice, it was very nice. I used to hook up a Roland to it, and worked really nicely.
So when I started at St. Pius, we had Breaking Bread, and Our Lady of Roe had the World Library seasonal missalette, so we really couldn't combine there. As Ginny said, there were at least 30 songs, which we were used to singing. I could probably name 20 right now. So we couldn't really coordinate our music that way, and I really never thought it was a good idea because, you know, we still weren't together. And now, our pastor has bought Word and Song for all of us. The secretary sent me an email saying we got no hymnals, if that's all right. So I'm like, I guess it is. So, at least we're consistent. So, for the 4 of us, because we float between our churches, we at least know we all have the same hymnal. We know what the responses are going to be every week. And I also do either recordings on a CD or I send out MIDI file or PDF or MP3 files for my people so they can practice everything. In terms of our structure, St. Pius has a very small choir of 5 people. They really don't understand the concept of parts, like people will sing a high note or a low note, the concept of tenor, bass means nothing. I have 20 people at Resurrection. Juliana has 20 people at Catherine's, and at Loretto, there's just 1 cantor. Honestly, if St. Pius were to stay open, I have a space for my choir about the width of this aisle. So when we get together, there's no room. So I don't know how that's going to work out, and I don't even know if we could fit 40 people in St. Catherine's either. So again, we'll see what happens, but the biggest struggle I think has been, as a musician, because we each take a mass during the Triduum, I was used to doing 3 masses, you know, and being able to direct the whole thing, and that's been a tough thing because you get used to doing that for how many years, and then you can't do it anymore. And while we work together, it's still kind of tough because you know you have stuff you want to do and you can't. But this is the reality we're in. So We don't have a budget. I try not to overspend. Our pastor kind of has the opinion that it's for liturgy, so I'm not going to go in there and, you know, say I bought $5,000 worth of music. I don't think he'll be too happy with me. But at the same time, I had a fairly brand new piano I wanted to donate to the parish, and I told him he just had to pay for it to be hoisted up over the loft. Because the keyboard I have right now, it sounds like a submarine sending out these. I don't know if there's any. It's like SOS. So, but I think he didn't want to take it because it's like, well, I don't know what church is going to say from it. I was like, well, whatever church stays open, you can take it. You know, I don't want to bag. So, you know, I feel like we're kind of limited in that regard. That, you know, we're ready to get this over with. I think there's a lot of fatigue in the music department and in the congregation. We've been talking about this for 5 years, and we want it to go. We want it to happen, whatever that means. So.
Sorry. Yeah, I kind of joked with my choir a couple of weeks ago about this upcoming merger, wherever we're going to fall. I said maybe we can pretend it's not happening and keep singing, you know. But you know, I'm probably out of it, I guess. I have not asked our pastor about a budget, and I mean, I'm going to share this with you. I don't put any money in the collection basket, but I will buy music as my contribution. And for like Christmas, Easter, Triduum, I make sure that I hire the same type of musician at both places. Like for instance, like Triduum will be at St. Philip, but for Easter Sunday, I want to make sure like I have a flutist, you know, at both places. I'm looking for a trumpeter, you know, but just to run the same program, like a prelude, maybe 20 or 30 minutes, have, example, like Christmas, congregation sing, pick out a hymn, couple hymns, intersperse with organ, flute, whatever it is, just to keep everything unified. Can't think of anything else.
So the question is budget. At the one church, at St. Anthony's, I had a very nice budget, and the other church didn't. But I don't, you know, I never ever spent everything in the budget, so I've never had a pastor in all my 25 years to tell me you stop spending. So I've been lucky because same thing. Sometimes I buy things myself. But as far as the merger, like Ted said, my budget even got bigger when the parishes came together, and we were able to hire brass a lot more often and some other things. So a lot of good things can come out of it.
But I think one thing that people need to consider is when you do merge, let's say, two large choirs, the pastor or administrator is going to have to realize that, you know, you're going to merge two libraries as well, but you're not going to have enough copies for everybody. So there has to be, I think it's important that they realize there has to be a budget so that you can purchase music, so that you're not doing the 1950s Catholic Church of photocopying everything. You know, even when I started at St. John Capistrand, I was amazed at the amount of photocopies that were present, and those immediately were taken to the trash.
Yeah.
Wait a minute,
And
wasn't
the
a
past-
composer?
Well, some of them were James Chaponis, but you know what? The other thing, the way I approached it was, you want to go to Aruba again, then I'll buy copies of this instead of using illegal copies.
So I'm at St. James in Wilkinsburg, and I was there 30 years ago. I just started last year kind of subbing. I'm still a glorified sub, but I'm doing all the planning and the choir and everything else. But St. James 40 years ago was a big church like East Liberty Presby or Sacred Heart or Calvary with this massive choral library. So I had Don Fellows and what's his name, Ken, come over and look, because I have pieces in there that were like 50 copies of stuff that you would use once in a choral lifetime in your parish. And to me, there has to be some kind of a central, use one of the empty churches to be a central music library where some of these choral things can go so that they can be shared. And so your parish wants to do, you know, the Poulon something or other, and, you know, those copies can be merged, and you can save bucks on some of that stuff. So that's a really important issue. I mean, right now I have 5 in the choir, all women.
Right.
So,
Well, I brought that to the attention of Father Jim as well, regarding some of the choral libraries and, you know, using those resources among churches instead of, you know, just having them take
I
up
have
space.
5 boxes of that stuff in my car right now. If anybody wants to.
She's selling it out of her trunk, ladies and gentlemen, right out of her trunk. All right, thank you. Well, we're down to our last question. Oh, go ahead.
I think that they should actually get a group together and seek out all this music in these other buildings that are closing. Because we used to have a whole storeroom full of music books, and an administrator decided to clean house after a fire inspection. And it all went in the dumpster. Thousands of dollars worth of music just disappeared. And with the number of staff people everybody has, any one of those could decide at any time to destroy all this music. So we, you know, if part of this merging thing, I think we should get a committee around to go to all these buildings and try to rescue that music before that happens again.
Okay, before we conclude with our last question, let's just have a poll here. How many of you are directors of music at present time? And how many are also organists? And how many are choir members or cantors only? And I believe we have a handbell director here this evening. All right. How many of you are handbell directors? There's a few of those here as well. Good. Did I miss anybody? No. Okay, well, we're going to address the last question. If you had to do it all over again, what might you have done differently to assure a smooth transition? So just think back, and you know, now hindsight is wonderful, and you can do something differently. What 1 or 2 things in particular would you do differently with upcoming mergers?
I definitely would have better familiarized myself with the parishes that we were merging with. I would have made it a point to find out a little more about where each church was musically, which resources they had, hymnals they had. I wouldn't have waited until after the fact to develop some kind of a plan to get the congregations on the same page. It took longer than it needed to. And again, as I said before, we didn't have a blueprint, so we were really feeling our way through it. But the congregations could have been brought together much faster had I been more proactive in trying to see, okay, St. Perpetua does this, that works for them. I should try to teach this to my congregation ahead of time. And that way we would have more common ground when the merger takes place.
What's that? Yeah. Hang on.
You know, there are times when, no matter how hard you try, that your best efforts go unrecognized, unappreciated, and sometimes they're not welcome. So I think what I would do differently is I would not stress about everything so much. I bent over backwards and it worked, but it took a toll on me, and I had many sleepless nights worrying about hurt feelings and how I could help those feelings not be hurt. Sometimes you just have to dust off your feet and move on. And some people will never be satisfied, no matter how much music you throw their way that they like or that they ask for. So I think going forward, I've gotten much older, and I have a better ability to say, no, this is not negotiable. And sometimes I think that we have to train ourselves to not bend over backwards that much, if that makes any sense to anybody.
I don't know that we could have done anything differently. It's been a learning experience, both the music department and for our congregation and for our pastor. And I try not to lose sleep over either. I think the hardest thing for all of us is ordinary forget of a job. But I believe that God will lead us all where we're supposed to be. So I don't know where that is, but it's in His hands. So that's all we can do.
Ginny, I echo you. I'm very sensitive. That's how I am. And if I were to do this again, I would be more assertive. I get intimidated very easily. I don't have enough confidence sometimes in myself. And sometimes working with different musicians, I think in my experience, everybody was worried about their job, and trying to impress the pastor. And I think as musicians, when a couple of things, they're going to need at least, I think, 2 musicians in every parish to handle funerals. We have a lot of them, and different mass schedules. That's one thing. And I think for us as musicians to be gentle with each other. Some of our membership have doctorates, some have masters, some have no degree but have plenty of talent and who are very gifted and who have had a lot of success in their own ministry. And I think it's being sensitive to each other and to sit down and say, okay, this is the repertoire that I have done. What about you? Should we learn new music? You know what I mean? And as far as lost music, yes, I was overwhelmed with the process because it was just hitting me just playing all these masses and, but Holy Innocents, I had 1 hour to get up there and just look through their files. I mean, I was just like quick, Guardian Angels, I missed that opportunity. The custodian never told me, so I would have been more assertive and had more confidence in myself that I hope for all of us that we have a lot to bring to the table.
The first thing I would do is make little changes the first year. Just listen, observe. On this new mission that we have, many of us will have 2, 3, 4 years to make these things happen. So try not to make too many changes at first and do a lot of listening. The second thing is I think the musicians need to be assertive. If the priests are only supposed to do 2 or 3 masses a weekend, it is super unfair to demand your musician to do 6 masses a weekend. Because nothing leads to burnout faster than overworking. My daughter is now 10 years old. I've missed most of our Christmases because Papa is fat butts on the organ bench all morning. So I just don't, if the church is about families, they need to really think about that. We need to practice what we preach. So we need to really hope for the best. And I'm blessed now at Sacred Heart. I have an assistant. And if I didn't, I'd have less hair. And I know after 5 years running back and forth between all those masses, and I was 20 years old, I'm not going to be doing that anymore.
All right, thanks so much. Please give a round of applause to our panelists. And before we take a break, there's a handout, I hope you picked it up. That's from NPM gave us permission to reprint some articles from their pastoral music magazine on merging, closing, and blending parishes. There's some really interesting insights in there. And you'll even get a chuckle out of a few of them, especially the organist that announced from the choir loft his last day, that this is the last day the choir is going to be here. And if you have any questions, come and see me, and I have a handout for you. I'm hoping that we don't have to get into that, in terms of, there were two directors. One had to be selected. The one that wasn't was very disgruntled, obviously. So take a look at those, and we're going to use those articles, our leadership team. We're going to be meeting soon to actually plan our 2018-19 calendar of events and meetings, and we hope that if you have any input, that you bring them to me, you bring them to one of our officers, you bring them to your district liaison, which is going to be changing at some point, I'm sure. Vicariate coordinators, I don't know if they're going to be 4 vicariates in the future. Right now, Julian Haig is Vicariate 1 coordinator. Norm Chapman, he's not feeling so well tonight, he is Vicariate 2. Anthony Milbauer, right here, is Vicariate 3 coordinator, and Sherry Whittico, she was supposed to be here, but anyway, she's our Vicariate 4 coordinator. You can always email them as well with your questions and your concerns regarding our future church and our future as a Pittsburgh chapter of NPM. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing? I am in the only parish that has a black pastor. And Father David Taylor has been going back and forth between our church, he's administrator at St. Charles Luanga in Homewood, St. James's in Wilkinsburg, Corpus Christi is in Larimer. And we are being paired with St. Bede's, which is lily white, like this congregation tonight. And they use, like the Lead Me, Guide Me, over in the so-called black and Italian parishes, because that's what the thing was there. But according to what you were saying about those other people, I only came on the parish last year, but for a year and a half, or whenever this process began, the pastoral councils, under Father Taylor's leadership, working with Father Bryce at St. Bede's, have had their pastoral councils meeting together. Yesterday, we did our second Taizé service where we rotate churches and use all musicians from all those places, and we had people from all those parishes come. There is a combined education ministry already. There are all of these things that I think if we do stuff from the ground roots up, you don't ask for permission. You don't ask for permission. You ask for forgiveness later. And I think that's what we need to do. And we need to link with each other and support one another. And
I echo that. I really think it's going to be the musicians. It's going to be a lot, because we are the creative minds. We are the people that can think outside of the box, and we can offer so much to a pastoral team. So that's the exciting part, I think, in looking in the future, is those kind of things. If we could just take 3 minutes, we're going to keep this. We're going to have evening prayer or night prayer shortly. We just have a few things to talk about business-wise, and then we will conclude with night prayer and go downstairs and continue our conversation over some goodies. All right? Thank you once again, everybody. Join NPM Pittsburgh, and you're a member of our chapter. So that's pretty simple. We also have our monthly calendar there that you can download. It has our deadlines, it has our leadership team meetings, so that you know ahead of time when those occur, in case you do have a question that you would like it to be addressed at our leadership team meetings. We meet once a month, so you can find our calendar there. Our next meeting, April 23rd, will take place at the Church of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin of the Beautiful River. On the Beautiful River. I couldn't fit it all on the screen. But that's going to take place at Assumption. Our host, Neil Stahersky, is here this evening. Both Neil and Don are going to do a presentation for the organist called Practical Suggestions for Service Playing. And that includes things like how do you adapt a beautiful John Rutter anthem that's written for piano to the organ, or what hymn registrations or registrations on the organ for certain things. It's going to be quite good. Improvisation of psalmody. There's going to be quite a few things that we will learn that evening. And we'll also take a little tour of the church. Neil's going to take us on a little tour after our pizza dinner. So it's only $10, and you're going to get pizza and salad and dessert and non-alcoholic beverage. Well, I know you'll bring your own, that's why.
BYOB part.
This guy will bring his own class, I'm sure. But anyway, so that's coming up April 23rd. We just ask that you go on our website to register for these things. It helps us in making sure that we have enough materials, enough food, etc. And since there is a little cost to this one, you'll need to register that. All right? So, there it is, April 23rd, pizza, pipes, and prayer. Oh, and by the way, there's a picture from our Candlemas celebration, and thanks again to Josh Mandish, who's also here tonight. Josh Mandish hosted our celebration of Candlemas. Thank you. The next slide will show us that our May event is our NPM Pittsburgh Diocesan Choral Festival. We haven't had one in about 3 or 4 years. John Miller was the last conductor of it. 2014, so it'll be 4 years. It's going to be held at the beautiful St. Bernard Church in Mount Lebanon, and our host, Chaz Bowers, is back here. The Director of Music Ministries there. He's also going to be the accompanist for the concert. Our guest conductor is Dr. Karen Daly. Karen is the Director of Choral Activities at Duquesne University, a Canadian with an interesting sense of humor, and I'm sure it's something that you will really enjoy her. There are, if you'll put to the next slide, there are regional rehearsals scheduled throughout the month of April and May, leading up to the concert. I think there are 10 or 12 different places. There's a schedule back here if you want to become part of it, or at least take the information on to your choir. I know it was emailed to you. Please, we're hoping to have at least 100 voices. And like I said, these regional rehearsals will take place, and then there's a dress rehearsal the night before the concert at St. Bernard's. And then the concert will be on the 15th of May. There is no charge, and we're going to be doing more publicity. You'll hear it on Wish Radio. And St. Bernard's has a wonderful publicity person that will be putting things out. You'll see it in bulletins. There are posters being designed right now that will be distributed to some of the parishes that participate. There's also some colored posters back there that you can hang up right now, just in your lobby or in your foyer or in your wherever, that you could start advertising for us, because we want to pack the church. That's our goal. And although there is no admission fee, we're going to take up either a non-perishable food item. We're asking people to bring to donate for the South Hills Interfaith Ministry, or those St. Winifred Food Bank will be distributed, and also tube socks for the homeless. Tube socks for the homeless. I just found out about this today from Chaz. So we're asking for donations of either a non-perishable food item or a pair of tube socks to help our cause.
Preferably not well worn.
Oh yes, preferably new. Okay, and that leads us to, that's where you register you can register there, you can register tonight. There's all kinds of ways that you can register for the Diocesan Choral Festival. I do have music packets tonight. Unfortunately, one of the pieces Dr. Daly selected is on back order, so I'll be mailing those. And in addition to the Freedom Trilogy, which is a pretty thick book that we'll be using, the diocese is running those off, and I tried desperately to get those today, and it didn't work. So I will be mailing out a couple extra things. But if you do take a packet tonight, my wife Karen back there will take your name and address, so that we know that you took the packet. You can also pay for the packet here. We're on high tech now with NPM. David Dreyer, our Director of Technology, has that little square device, and you can go ahead and charge it right here tonight if you wish. And finally, yes, finally, maybe finally, the Mardi Gras celebration. I want to thank everybody that either participated, donated a basket, made it such a fun evening. We are happy to announce this is our major fundraiser of the year. This is our second year to do it, that we made $3,001. $3,001. I'm going to turn this over quickly here to our treasurer, who's going to let you know where we are financially.
We have our current balance is $5,158, and we've had expenses this month of $4,700, and we deposited $3,600. So we're doing pretty good.
The money. Yeah, we better start spending it. That's all I can say. All right. So thanks again, folks. We're going to now turn to prayer. Thanks to Teresa and her choir up here. We're going to have our night prayer, and then following the night prayer, you're welcome to go downstairs for some koinonia time.